Big news just dropped, and it has sent waves of shock and excitement across both the political and financial spaces. The White House itself has officially posted something on social media that made people absolutely go nuts. But the real question is, what does Shiba Inu have to do with this? If you're wondering why this political post suddenly connects to the world of cryptocurrencies, and especially Shiba Inu, then this video is for you. Stick around, because I'll explain everything in detail, and I promise you won't want to miss a second of it. Recently, the White House's official account on X, formerly known as Twitter, posted something that caught everyone's attention. The post said, "This week, we learned monthly inflation in October was 0, and the economy grew by more than 5% last quarter. Under Bidenomics, inflation is falling, and the economy is growing from the middle out and bottom up." Now, on the surface, that might sound positive. 0 inflation for the month and over 5% growth? That should be good news, right? But if you've been following economics closely, you already know the numbers don't always tell the whole story. And this is where the controversy begins. Let's take a step back and break this down. Inflation, in the simplest terms, is the rate at which the general price of goods and services goes up. When inflation rises, the same amount of money buys you fewer goods. For example, if you were able to buy groceries worth $100 last year, you may need $110 or $115 for the same items this year if inflation continues to climb. So, inflation directly reduces your purchasing power over time. That's why when governments and leaders talk about inflation, it has a huge effect on how people feel about the economy and, ultimately, about their personal finances. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. The White House claimed inflation was 0 for October. But almost immediately, a feature on X called Community Notes flagged the post as misleading. If you've been on Twitter long enough, you've probably seen these community notes pop up on posts that seem misleading or incomplete. Essentially, community notes allow contributors to fact-check and add clarifying context to tweets, so misinformation doesn't spread unchecked. And that's exactly what happened here. The community note under the White House's post explained that the statement referred specifically to the PCE index, which stands for Personal Consumption Expenditures. PCE measures how much people spend on goods and services in a given month and is one way economists evaluate inflation. But here's the problem. Inflation is usually measured year over year, not month to month. Saying that October inflation was 0 doesn't mean inflation is gone, it just means that the PCE index didn't show an increase compared to the previous month. In contrast, the more commonly referenced inflation measure, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, shows that annual inflation is still around 3.2%. The CPI is basically like a giant shopping cart full of everyday items that average consumers buy, things like clothes, food, gas, and electronics. When the government looks at how much the prices of those items change over time, that's CPI. PCE, on the other hand, covers a wider range of goods and services but can sometimes smooth over the details that directly impact consumers. So, while the White House technically wasn't lying, the post created a misleading impression. Inflation hasn't magically disappeared, it's still here, and Americans are still feeling it when they shop, when they pay their rent, and when they fill their gas tanks. Now, here's the key connection. Inflation affects the way people save, spend, and invest their money. When governments need more money, they can increase the amount of currency in circulation, sometimes by literally printing it, though more often by creating it electronically. If that extra money isn't matched by an increase in production of goods and services, then the prices of things rise. That's inflation in action. And this is exactly where cryptocurrencies like Shiba Inu come into play. Unlike the US dollar or other fiat currencies, cryptocurrencies aren't controlled by governments or central banks. They are decentralized, running on blockchain networks that have fixed or predictable supply rules. Shiba Inu, for example, cannot be inflated at will. The rules of its supply are coded into its blockchain protocol. That means no central authority can suddenly decide to print more SHIB tokens out of thin air. For many people, this makes cryptocurrencies a potential hedge against inflation. If fiat money is being devalued by overprinting, people may prefer to store their wealth in assets like Shiba Inu that can't be easily manipulated by central banks. Now, some might ask, why Shiba Inu specifically? Why not just stick with Bitcoin, which is the original and largest cryptocurrency? That's a fair question, and the answer lies in Shiba Inu's unique history and tokenomics. When Shiba Inu was first launched, it had a total supply of 1 quadrillion tokens. That's a mind-blowing number. But from the very beginning, half of that supply was sent to the wallet of Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin. At one point, those tokens were worth billions. Instead of keeping them, Buterin donated about 10% of his SHIB holdings to a COVID relief fund in India, and then he burned the rest, sending them to a dead wallet that nobody can access. That single action burned over $6 billion worth of SHIB permanently, reducing the circulating supply and making the token more scarce. This event is often called one of the most historic burns in crypto history. Not only did it immediately reduce supply, but it also gave Shiba Inu a reputation as a deflationary token. Since then, the Shiba Inu community has adopted burning as an ongoing mechanism to further decrease the supply. Shibaswap, the project's decentralized exchange, has built-in token burn features, and the launch of Shibarium, Shiba Inu's Layer 2 blockchain, has also introduced more opportunities for burns. Each burn reduces circulating supply, which, over time, could increase the value of each token if demand continues to rise. So, when people worry about inflation eating away at the value of their dollars, tokens like Shiba Inu stand out because of their scarcity mechanics. Just like gold has been a store of value for centuries because it's rare, Shiba Inu has the potential to act as a store of value in the digital era because its supply is being actively reduced. But let's not sugarcoat it. Cryptocurrencies are still volatile. The price of SHIB can go up and down dramatically based on market sentiment, regulations, and broader economic conditions. That being said, many investors see that volatility as an opportunity. While Bitcoin is considered more stable and is often seen as digital gold, Shiba Inu attracts attention because of its explosive growth potential. And here's another angle to consider: the Shiba Inu community. Unlike most cryptocurrencies, Shiba Inu has built one of the largest and most dedicated online communities in the entire crypto space. The so-called SHIB army continues to push the token forward through constant promotion, burns, and ecosystem development. When you combine community-driven enthusiasm with deflationary tokenomics, you get a recipe for long-term resilience. Now, think about how this ties back to the White House's post. If inflation is still a real issue, despite government attempts to downplay it, more and more people may start looking for alternatives to traditional fiat money. And when they do, cryptocurrencies become an obvious option. While Bitcoin may be the first stop for institutional investors, everyday retail investors are often drawn to tokens like Shiba Inu because of their affordability, community backing, and potential upside. In other words, misleading statements about inflation don't just spark debates in politics, they can push people into considering new financial tools to protect their wealth. Shiba Inu, with its deflationary supply and growing ecosystem, is becoming one of those tools. So, what's the takeaway here? Inflation isn't gone, no matter what kind of spin politicians put on the numbers. People are feeling the squeeze in their everyday lives, and that reality pushes them to explore alternatives. Shiba Inu stands out as one of the more accessible and community-driven ways to fight back against the loss of purchasing power. The burns, the fixed supply, the Shibarium developments, all of these work together to make SHIB not just another meme coin, but a serious contender in the fight against inflationary pressures. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe Shiba Inu can really act as a hedge against inflation the way Bitcoin is often promoted? Or do you think it's too risky compared to traditional assets? Comment down below with your thoughts, because this is a conversation worth having. And with that, we come to the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the breakdown and learned something new about how Shiba Inu connects to inflation and even the White House's social media posts, don't forget to hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you never miss an update, and share this video with your friends to spread the word. The Shiba Inu story is only getting more interesting, and together, we'll stay ahead of the curve.